6:42 in the evening. Asheville Regional Tarmac. A Gulfstream G550 sat ready, navigation lights blinking, airstairs down, pilot waiting at the steps. Wren Halliday stepped from a black Range Rover red dress, blonde hair loose, sunglasses on, Hermes bag on her arm. Her heels clicked across the concrete toward the aircraft. From a neighboring hangar, a man in blue coveralls burst out at a run, a wrench in his hand, cutting across her path. Breathing hard, eyes locked on hers, he said it loud. "Don't board that plane." Wren stopped. Took off the sunglasses. Looked at him. And laughed. The laugh thinned in the air and hung there a second longer than it should have. Wren tilted her head. "Who are you?" She moved to step around him. He stepped with her, not touching, just blocking her path. 30 seconds. "Then you can fly or stay. Your choice." Captain Riordan came down the airstairs with his hand half raised, signaling toward the ground crew to call security. Wren held up her own hand without looking at him. "Wait." The man pointed at the right side of the aircraft, aft of the wing, at the engine cowling. "I came out of hangar 3:10 minutes ago. I had your logbook in front of me for about that long. Tail number November 550 Hotel Tango. The number 3 hydraulic servo actuator was logged as replaced in March. The part number in the entry is not an OEM Gulfstream part. It is a gray market equivalent. About a third of the price, not certified for hydraulic pressure loads above 30,000 feet. Wren's eyes narrowed. "You're a mechanic. Which hangar?" "The one next door. Blue Ridge Aviation Services. Sutton Vance contracted me last week to work a King Air. I saw your G550 on the floor while I was waiting on a part. And you read my logbook. It was open on the bench. I read it. I'm not sorry." Wren turned to the pilot. "Captain Riordan. Do you know anything about this?" Riordan's face went pale. He did not. Pilots do not verify part numbers, that is the work of mechanics and the director of flight operations. The man in coveralls spoke again, lower this time. "You are filed for flight level 410 tonight. Winds at altitude are out of the northwest at 30 knots. If that actuator fails during your climb out of Teterboro and the failure rate on that part in those conditions is north of 20% per 100 flight hours, you lose primary hydraulic control. There is no recovery. I have stood over the wreckage of 3 aircraft that went down for that exact reason." "You stood over." He was quiet for 2 seconds. "I worked at the NTSB, Senior Air Safety Investigator. Gulfstream desk. 11 years. I left 3 years ago." The wind crossed the tarmac. Wren's red dress lifted and settled. She said nothing for half a minute. She looked at her aircraft as if for the first time, not as transportation, not as an extension of her calendar, but as a thing that could kill her. She turned to Riordan. "Ground the aircraft. We're not flying tonight." "Ma'am, the New York meeting in the morning." "Ground it." She turned back. "My office. Tomorrow. 8. Bring the logbook. It isn't mine. But I'll have a copy." She pulled a business card from the Hermes bag. Her fingers shook, slightly. She closed her hand around the card to hide it. He took it, didn't look at the name, slid it into his chest pocket. Wren walked back to the Range Rover. Before the driver shut her door, she looked out once more. The man was still on the tarmac, wrench in his hand, watching her leave. From the window of Hangar 3, Sutton Vance watched too. He didn't recognize the technician. But he recognized the Range Rover. And he saw it was not taking off. He picked up his phone. She had flown that aircraft 62 times. She had never once asked what held it in the air. At 8 the next morning, Callum Reeve walked into the Halliday Textiles building on Pack Square. He'd traded the coveralls for a clean flannel shirt and jeans. His hands were washed. His fingernails still held dark traces of engine grease the way hands do when a man has spent 20 years with them in machinery. The receptionist walked him back. Wren was already their gray blazer today, hair up, 2 cups of coffee on the desk. "I didn't know what you take." "I guessed black." "Black's right." He set a brown paper bag on the table. Inside were copies of pages from the G550 logbook, 3 of them flagged with colored tabs. He opened to the first. He walked her through the March entry part number, supplier, signature line. Ren wrote in a leather notebook. How do you know these part numbers? That isn't normal for a mechanic. Callum was quiet a moment. Then he reached into his back pocket and put a worn business card on the table. The name on it read, Callum Reeve, Senior Air Safety Investigator, National Transportation Safety Board, Office of Aviation Safety, Washington, D.C. The expiration date was 22. Ren picked it up, looked at it. Then turned to the laptop on the credenza behind her and typed his name into a search engine. The first result was from Aviation Week, dated 2019, Reeve leads NTSB investigation into Teterboro Gulfstream incident. Findings restructure FAA Part 135 oversight, The second was a link to his testimony before the Senate Subcommittee on Aviation Safety in 2020. She looked up. The man across from her, grease still in his fingernails, working out of a small shop in Black Mountain, had written part of the federal regulation she was at that moment relying on to keep her alive. Why did you leave the NTSB? Her voice was quieter than she'd meant. Personal. Not relevant. She didn't push. He returned to the logbook. Pointed to another entry, a hydraulic temperature sensor bypassed in software instead of replaced. Pointed to a July pilot report on slight yaw at cruise that had been closed out as times no action required times without any certifying mechanic's signature. Ren kept writing. Her face was getting paler by the minute. She set the pen down. Laced her fingers. Looked out the window at Asheville under a pale November sun. Callum, may I call you Callum? Yes. If you hadn't been on that tarmac last night. If you hadn't run out, I would have boarded that plane. Yes. In 6 years as CEO, I have never once personally read a logbook on any aircraft I've flown. Most CEOs don't. But most CEOs don't have Sutton Vance. He was quiet a beat. No. Most don't. Will you help me? Help you do what? Find everything he's done. Not just the G550. The whole fleet. How many aircraft does Halliday operate? 5. He studied her across the desk. I'll need unrestricted hangar access. I'll need the full export from your maintenance tracking system raw, not the summary version. And you need to understand that if Sutton Vance has done what I think he's done, this isn't a personnel matter. This is FBI. I understand. He stood. He offered his hand across the desk. She took it. The first time they touched. Her hand was small and cold. His was warm and weathered from years of work. Downstairs, on the 9th floor, Sutton Vance was watching the lobby security feed on his laptop. He saw Callum Reeve step into the elevator. He closed the laptop, and for the first time in 18 years of working for the Halliday family, he was afraid. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Callum walked into Hangar 3 for the first time with a Halliday credential clipped to his belt. Sutton was there. Polite. The politeness was thin. Callum moved around the G550 slowly, making notes on a steno pad. He found a screw on the engine number 3 cowling that had been over-torqued, backed out, and reseated within the last 48 hours. Someone had tried to cover something up after his warning. Ren arrived at 4:15. She wore a blazer, but flat shoes. It was the first time Callum had seen her in anything that wasn't a heel. She stood a few feet back and watched him work. You can leave if you need to. I'm guessing you're busy. I had a meeting in Charlotte at 5:30. I cancelled it. Why? Because I want to understand my aircraft. He smiled. Small, at the corner of his mouth. It was the first time he'd smiled in her presence. At 5:45 he glanced at his watch and his face changed. I need to leave. My son. After school closes at 6. 3 seconds of silence. You have a son. Micah. He's 8. I didn't know. I didn't mention it. Sorry, I have to go now. Go. Tomorrow. He drove his Ford pickup to Evergreen Community Charter School. Micah came running out, backpack bouncing, a paper airplane pinched between 2 fingers. A shape Callum recognized. Gulfstream G550. Miss Hayes taught us today. Dad knows. Dad knows. Dad knows. On the way back toward Black Mountain, Callum was quieter than usual. Micah noticed. Children always notice. You okay, Dad? I met somebody today, buddy. She's a good person. Who? Callum hesitated. A woman. She has a big airplane. I'm helping her fix it. A G550? As a matter of fact. Yeah. A G550. Wow. Saturday morning. Ren called. She said she was passing through Black Mountain. Callum did not ask what she might be passing through Black Mountain to. There is no road from Biltmore Forest that is on the way to anywhere else. She pulled up at the shop at 10. Callum was bent over the cowling of a Cessna 172. Micah was sitting on an upturned crate with a sheet of paper across his knees, folding. Micah. This is Miss Wren. The boy looked up. He studied her for 10 seconds. Then, are you the lady with the big plane? Your dad told you. Dad said you're a good person. Wren looked at Callum. Callum looked away, giving her a moment, but the tips of his ears had gone pink. She sat down on the crate next to Micah. She asked him about the plane in his hand. He talked for 20 minutes every kind of plane he'd folded, which wing angles flew longest, why you had to fold the nose a certain way or it nosedived. She listened. She asked questions. Her questions were good questions. Micah looked up at her with the particular surprised pleasure of a child who has been asked something by an adult who actually wants the answer. Callum watched from across the yard. He could not put a name to what he was feeling in that moment. Before she left, Micah asked. Is Miss Wren coming back? Wren looked at Callum. Callum said, if she wants to. I come. Callum stood on the workshop steps, watching her taillights disappear down the gravel road. Micah, beside him, folded another paper plane, this one larger than the rest. Without looking up, the boy said, Dad. That one's for her. Callum found Della Yates by going to the Home Depot on Tunnel Road and standing near the tool department until her shift started. When she came in, tying her orange apron over a faded t-shirt, he walked over. He only said one thing. I worked for the NTSB for 11 years. I'm not here to make trouble for you. Give me 10 minutes. Della refused. She'd signed a non-disclosure with Halliday. Callum nodded, pulled out the old NTSB card, and wrote his cell number on the back of it in pencil. If you change your mind. No pressure. He left. That night, Wren called him. She didn't have a reason. She said she couldn't sleep. Callum sat on the wooden steps outside his house, phone against his shoulder, looking at the stars over Black Mountain. They talked for 40 minutes. Not about the plane. Not about Sutton. About Asheville. About a bookstore in Montford that they had both been to without knowing it. I read a book there in 2019, she said. Never bought it. Just stood in the corner and read it. Which book? Asterisk. The Overstory. Asterisk Richard Powers. Callum went quiet for 5 seconds. Elena read that book before she died. In the hospital. Callum, I'm sorry. No. Don't be sorry. I'm glad you read it. Monday morning. Callum went back to Hangar 3. Sutton was there early, more careful. Callum found another entry, a July pilot report on vibration in engine number 4 of a Holiday Citation X. The report had been deleted. The deletion timestamp was still in the metadata. 11. Wren walked in with 2 paper cups. Handed him one. He thanked her. They stood under the wing of the G550 for 30 seconds in silence. A comfortable silence. I might need you to do something. Namit. There's a former mechanic. I think she knows more than I do. She signed an NDA with Halliday. I need her released. No conditions. Her name. Della Yates. Wren took her phone and called her general counsel from the hangar floor. 15 minutes later a release was signed, scanned, and sent. You didn't ask her name before you signed. I didn't need to. You said you needed it. Callum looked at her. It held longer than 3 seconds. He looked away before she had to. That afternoon Della called. She agreed to meet. Callum drove to her house in Swannanoa. She brought him into the garage. On a high shelf, behind paint cans, was a tin box. Inside was a small stack of papers, copies that were not supposed to exist. In Della's handwriting, February, Actuator replacement performed with non-OEM part, PN 23076-401. Will not certify. Vance instructed me to sign regardless. I refused. Terminated 3 days later. I have a daughter. 11. Lupus. If Halliday sues me, they won't. Ren Halliday released you from the NDA this morning. I didn't ask you for anything until after that happened. Della cried then. Not loud. Her shoulders shook 3 seconds and she wiped her face with the back of her wrist. Callum held the papers. His own hands were unsteady in a way they hadn't been in years. Outside, the Blue Ridge was turning the color of old copper in the October sun. Callum drove back toward Asheville with the evidence folder on the passenger seat, the seat where, 4 hours later, Ren Halliday would sit for the first time. The next Saturday, Ren came back to the shop. She did not say she was passing through. She texted. Am I coming? He wrote back. Come. She wore jeans. A black sweater. No Hermes bag, no heels. Callum tried not to look surprised and mostly failed. Micah ran out of the house and hugged her before she could speak. She froze. She hadn't expected to be hugged. Then she hugged him back. Tentatively at first. Then tighter, the way a person hugs who has only just remembered how. Callum was at the workbench, fixing a neighbor's lawnmower. Micah dragged Ren into the shop and showed her a new paper plane he'd folded the night before, more complicated than the last, the wings notched in an origami pattern he had found in a library book. Ren sat on the wooden crate. She watched the two of them work. She didn't say much. She just sat. At lunchtime, Callum made grilled cheese 3 sandwiches, one for each of them. They ate at the wooden table on the front porch in the October wind. Miss Wren, Micah said, how many planes do you have? 5. Wow. How many does Dad have? None. Dad just fixes them now. But Dad used to. Callum looked at his son. Micah stopped. Wren noticed the pause. She didn't ask. After lunch, Micah ran off to the neighbor's yard. It was just Callum and Wren on the porch. What was he going to say? Callum was quiet for 10 seconds. When I was at the NTSB, I flew with investigator teams, usually on Cessna citations. Elena came sometimes. Micah remembers one of those trips. It wasn't Dad's plane. It was a memory. You miss Elena. Every day. She didn't say anything. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Very lightly. No pressure. 5 seconds. Then she drew it back. Callum didn't pull away first. That mattered. That evening Wren drove back to Biltmore Forest. Later she sent Callum a text. It wasn't about the plane, and it wasn't about Sutton. I hadn't eaten a grilled cheese since I was 9. Thank you, He wrote back. Micah says you promised to come again next week. I'll come. Meanwhile, Sutton Vance had begun moving money. He wired $340,000 to an account in the Caymans in 2 tranches. He didn't know the FBI had begun watching his transfers 3 days earlier. Callum had called a friend at the Charlotte field office. Sunday night, alone in the hangar after hours, Sutton sat at his desk with a bottle of whiskey he kept in a bottom drawer. He looked at the framed photograph of his family on the shelf. His wife. His grown son, a second year at Duke Medical. He thought about what he had done for the bonus, and how the bonus was paying for the medical school tuition that was going to make his son into a man who saved lives. He did not feel remorse. He felt afraid. At that same hour, in a small house in Black Mountain, Callum was reading a bedtime story to his son. Micah fell asleep on the 3rd page. Callum closed the book and sat there in the low lamplight, his son's small body breathing softly against his arm, and thought for the first time in 3 years that he might be ready to love someone again. Tuesday, Callum and Wren met Della at Double D's Coffee, a red double-decker bus parked in a lot off Biltmore Avenue. They sat on the upper deck. The bus was almost empty. Della handed over the full stack of papers. Callum walked Wren through each entry. The evidence covered not only the G550, 4 other Halliday aircraft had similar irregularities. Della set her coffee cup down. Miss Halliday. There's something I haven't told Mr. Reeve. You need to hear this from me. Wren looked at her. Last September. Your father, Mr. Richard Halliday, flew your Citation X tail number November 210 Hotel Tango to the Mayo Clinic for treatment. I was the NP assigned to prep that aircraft. Sutton instructed me to skip a crack inspection on the left leading edge. The crack was only 2 inches. In the composite skin. He said it wasn't worth the downtime. Della's hands were folded in her lap. I didn't skip it. I stayed in the hangar until 2 in the morning. Did the composite repair myself. Off the clock. I didn't log it, because Sutton had already signed off. But at cabin pressure above 35,000 feet, that crack would have propagated. Your father might not have come home. Wren set the coffee cup down. Her hand was shaking. Callum sat beside her, his arm along the back of her chair, not touching, but close. Della. You saved my father's life. And I fired you. You didn't fire me, Miss Halliday. Sutton fired me. In your name. Wren was quiet for 20 seconds. You have a daughter. 11. Lupus. Della looked up, startled. Callum hadn't mentioned the illness. Wren had looked it up herself. I want you back at Halliday. In a new position. Head of Maintenance Quality Assurance. Your own office. Full veto authority on any sign-off you don't trust. Your salary will be 3 times what you were making before. Family medical the highest tier effective your first day. No waiting period. Della cried then, and didn't try to stop it. She nodded. She couldn't speak. Wren reached across the table and took Della's hand. You've been alone too long. So have you, Miss Halliday. Wren stilled. She didn't have an answer. Callum sat very still. 3 days later the FBI Charlotte Field office opened a formal investigation. The FAA Flight Standards District Office in Atlanta sent a team, led by Ray Oxendine, a man who had served under Callum at the NTSB a decade earlier. The Halliday fleet went under audit. 2 other aircraft carried non-OEM parts. One had a maintenance entry that had been edited after the original date. Sutton refused to cooperate. He retained his own counsel. Friday night. Callum and Wren were in her office, working late on the document package for the emergency board meeting. 10:15. Why did you really leave the NTSB? He told her. About Elena, about Micah being 5 when Elena died. About the night in Tennessee when he'd been standing in a field next to the wreckage of a Gulfstream, and had realized he had been absent from his son's birthday for the 2nd year in a row. I thought if I don't come home, Micah is going to grow up remembering my face from a photograph. The way he remembers his mother's. I couldn't do that. So you left. He left. And you don't regret it? No. She was quiet. Then, Callum, I'm sorry I laughed on the tarmac. Most people laugh. Until they understand. Outside the window, downtown Asheville shimmered in the October rain. Neither of them reached to close the blinds. Monday. Emergency board meeting. 12th floor, Halliday Textiles. 8 board members in person. 1 on video from London. Richard Halliday, Wren's father, sat in a guest chair. He did not vote. He was present because his daughter had asked him to be. Wren presented the full case. Callum walked them through the technical findings. Della was brought in 30 minutes into the meeting. Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. When Richard Halliday heard the part about the Mayo Clinic, about the composite crack, he sat very still for 80 seconds. Then he stood up. He walked across the boardroom. Everyone else stopped speaking and put his arms around Della. He held her a long time. He said something too low for anyone else to hear. Only Della caught it. Thank you for not signing. Della cried. Richard did too. He didn't hide it. The board voted 8-1. Sutton Vance was suspended with salary held in escrow. The FBI received the full document package. Halliday filed civil suit. 3 days later, Sutton was indicted on 6 federal counts under Title 18, Section 38, falsification of aviation maintenance records. Bail $250,000. He posted it and walked out wearing an ankle monitor. His lawyer began plea negotiations. Thursday night. Callum took Wren to dinner. Not a restaurant. She would have chosen a pizza place in the River Arts District. Micah came. Third time Callum had seen Wren in jeans. Micah sat between them. He asked her about the G550 service ceiling, range, engine type. She answered most of it. She had been studying. Miss Wren. Have you slept over at Dad's house yet? The whole table went quiet. Callum nearly choked on his pizza. Wren laughed a real laugh, from somewhere she hadn't used in a long time. No, Micah. I haven't. You should. There's a spare room. My mom used to sleep there. It's empty now. Micah, buddy, Callum said, quietly. What, Dad? Callum looked at Wren. Wren looked back. Neither of them could speak. After dinner, Micah fell asleep in the back seat. Callum drove her home. They didn't speak the whole way. At the front gate, she didn't get out right away. What Micah said. I'm sorry. He's 8. I'm not sorry. He said something I wasn't going to say myself. Callum looked at her. Wren. I don't know how to do this. I haven't dated anyone since I was 26. I have a son. I live in a rental cabin. I work 36 hours a week in a shop to pay for his school. I know. And you're not put off by that. 5 seconds. Callum. The day my father nearly died last year, I did not have anyone to call. No one. I am 37 years old with $2 billion, and I did not have a single phone number I felt I could dial at 3 in the morning. You ask if I'm put off. I'm afraid of living like that for one more year. He reached across the console and took her hand. They sat like that for 5 minutes. Micah slept in the back seat. Then she got out. Before she closed the door, Saturday, the shop. 10. I'll be there. Driving back to Black Mountain, Callum kept glancing in the rearview mirror, not at his son, but at the empty passenger seat where her hand had been. The seat was warm for the next 40 minutes, 5 weeks later. FAA Regional Office, Atlanta. Administrative hearing on the recertification of the Halliday fleet. Callum was there as an independent technical consultant. Wren as CEO, Della as head of maintenance quality assurance. She was wearing a blazer for the first time in her life. Sutton Vance was not there. The previous week he had signed a plea agreement, 7 years in federal prison, a permanent bar from commercial aviation, and $2.8 million in civil restitution to Halliday. The hearing ran 4 hours. Callum delivered the technical findings in the clean, affectless voice of a man who had once done this for a living. Wren spoke on corporate accountability. She did not deflect her own role. At the end, the lead FAA examiner asked Callum one final question. Mr. Reeve. You left this agency 3 years ago. What made you stand on that tarmac the night you did? Callum was quiet a long moment. My wife Elena used to tell me knowledge doesn't retire, Callum. People do. I heard the number 3 engine at idle that night. It was the wrong sound. I couldn't walk away. The room was silent. Wren, in the second row, dropped her gaze to the floor. Nobody saw her cry except Della, who was sitting next to her. Della put her hand over Wren's beneath the table. The FAA reinstated the Halliday fleet under enhanced oversight for a period of 24 months. In the Atlanta parking lot at 5:30, Della stepped away to call her daughter. Callum and Wren walked slowly toward the rental car. Wren stopped in the aisle. If you hadn't come running onto that tarmac, I would be dead. And no one would ever know who killed me. I don't think about it that way. You should. I think about something else. What? He looked at her for a long time. I haven't been waiting for anyone for 3 years. And I've come to realize I've been waiting for you. Every day. Wren didn't say anything. She put her hand in his, all the fingers, fully interlaced, no embrace. No kiss. Just her hand in his hand for 10 seconds. They drove back toward Asheville on I-85 North in a light rain. Wren slept. Callum drove slower than he usually drove. He didn't turn on the radio. Near midnight, he pulled into a Shell station outside Greenville, South Carolina, for gas. Wren woke and rubbed her eyes. She watched him under the yellow light over the pumps. She realized she wanted to watch him pump gas outside Greenville, every month, for the rest of her life. She opened the door. She walked around the front of the car to him. Callum. She went up on the balls of her feet and kissed him. Quick, light. She pulled back. He didn't react for 3 seconds. Then he let go of the pump handle. He put both hands around her face and kissed her back. Longer this time. A semi roared past on I-85. Neither of them looked. Somewhere in West Asheville, a former mechanic named Della Yates was tucking her 11-year-old daughter into bed. The girl asked, "Mom, are you happy now?" Della said, "Yes, baby. For the first time in a long time." December. Light snow over Asheville. The NTSB in Washington extended Callum an offer senior advisor, part-time, remote, no relocation required. He could train the next generation of investigators and still be home with Micah every night, in the cabin in Black Mountain, the way he had promised his son 3 years ago. He asked Micah first. "Are you going to be home every night, Dad?" "Every night." "Then yes." He called Ren before he accepted. "I wanted to ask you. It isn't my decision. I want it to be your decision." 12 seconds of silence on the line. Saturday. The shop. 4. She hung up. Saturday. Ren arrived at exactly 4. Snow had begun falling in light flakes. She was carrying a small brown paper-wrapped package, a metal scale model of a G550, with Micah's name engraved underneath the base. She had had it made in Charlotte the week before, from a shop that usually did trophies. Micah opened the package and stared at it for a long moment before running off to show the neighbor. Ren and Callum sat together on the wooden steps of the workshop. Snow gathered on her shoulders and she didn't brush it off. "I took the NTSB offer for you," he said. "I'll be busier. You'll be home every night." "Every night. I know. Ren." He pulled a small box from the breast pocket of his jacket. "Not black. Dark navy, worn at the edges." He opened it. Inside was a single ring small, 1 carat, plain gold band. His grandmother's ring, from Pittsburgh, 1942. His mother had kept it in a drawer for 40 years. He had taken it out of that drawer in October, the day after Ren first came to the shop. "I don't have a tower, I don't have a plane. I have a shop, a son, and 37 years I haven't used up yet. Marry me." She didn't answer for 3 seconds. Then she started laughing and crying at the same time. She nodded. "Yes. Callum." "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been sized for her. Neither of them commented on that. Micah came running back and saw. He wasn't surprised he'd known since November when he'd seen his father looking at a catalog of old rings at the kitchen table. "Is Miss Wren gonna be my mom now?" Wren froze. She looked at Callum. Callum gave her a very small nod. Wren knelt down in the snow, eye level with the boy. "Micah. I'm never going to replace your mother. Nobody can. But I'd like to love you. If you'll let me." Micah hugged her a long time. "You can be my extra mom. Is that okay?" "Yes, Micah. Extra mom." Callum turned away to wipe his face. Inside the workshop, on the wooden shelf above the workbench, sat a photograph of Elena holding newborn Micah in 2016. Callum had turned to face it many times in the past 3 years. Tonight, for the first time, he did not feel like he was being watched. He felt like he was being blessed. Saturday, May 16th. The conservatory garden at the Biltmore estate. Dogwoods in full white bloom, magnolias pink. 4 o'clock light the color of honey. 62 guests. No press. No social media. Wren wore a simple ivory gown. No long train. No jewelry except the ring. Blonde hair down and unpinned. No sunglasses. She did not want anything on her face today. Callum wore a navy suit. Not a tuxedo. The tie had been picked out by Micah at a Belk store the week before. Richard Halliday walked her down the aisle. He cried before she did. She smiled and held him steady. Della stood in the front row. Her daughter, 12 now, stronger than she had been in a year, held the bouquet. Della had secretly been matron of honor, though Wren had only told her 3 weeks earlier. Ray Oxendine had flown in from the NTSB, 2 of Callum's old colleagues from the Office of Aviation Safety were there. Micah was ring bearer. Halfway down the aisle he forgot the rules, turned around, ran back and hugged his father, then hugged Wren, who was still walking toward the altar. Everyone laughed. Ren kissed the crown of his head and kept walking. When it came to the vows, Callum spoke first. Ren. I came out to the airport that night for a used tire one of the guys had left me. I heard your engine at idle. Wrong sound. I looked up and saw you step out of a Range Rover in a red dress. I thought that woman is about to board an unsafe aircraft, and nobody is going to say anything if I don't. I didn't know I was saving your life. I didn't know you were saving mine, but you did. You pulled me out of 3 years of silence. You taught my son how to laugh again. You became the reason I get out of bed. I'm not promising you wealth today. You have that. I'm promising you my presence. Every night. Every morning. Every year I have left. Ren cried openly. She didn't hide it. Callum. I laughed at you on the tarmac. I'll be sorry for that every day of my life. You are the first person I ever met who didn't want anything from me. You only wanted me to live. You gave me a family I had stopped letting myself imagine. A son who calls me his extra mom. A cabin with grilled cheese on Saturdays. I'm marrying you not because I'm afraid of being alone. I'm marrying you because I finally understand what it means to not be alone. They exchanged rings. They kissed. The guests applauded. Micah ran up between them and wrapped his arms around both of them at once. 3 people, 1 not. He had come to the airport that October evening for a used tire. She had been on her way to sign a deal. Neither of them had known that the most important moment of their lives was going to happen because a man heard a sound that wasn't supposed to be there. The Gulfstream that had almost killed her sat decommissioned in Hangar 3, tail number preserved. But the quiet they had learned to share that had only just begun. And it would last them all their lives.